Okay, yep, cool. So, good afternoon, everybody. If you don't know who Basestone is, you should know now because we won Best Application of Technology Award last night at DCW. So, and the team is sitting here at the front of the stage to heckle me. So Basestone is a web and mobile application, and we're currently focused on assurance, and particularly field assurance in the construction industry. And today I'm going to talk about blockchain in construction, but a little bit of background about why we're talking about blockchain in construction. So Basestone came through Techstars' FinTech Accelerator back in 2015. And part of that accelerator was 4 blockchain companies were part of that accelerator. I'm going to talk about one of them later on, which is Everledger. I have a background in physics and finance and 5 years in construction working with Basestone. So the question I want to kind of ask today is, as a person or as a company, should I invest in blockchain? I'm not asking the question, should I invest in Bitcoin? If you've got answers to that, I'm happy to talk about that later, but personally I'm not putting any money into Bitcoin at the moment. So if I'm going to invest in a technology, how do I understand the cost of investing in that technology? What does it mean to invest in that technology? Is it my personal time, my company's time, the money we've spent? But you've got to consider the other possibilities is that, what's the opportunity cost? There are a lot of technologies around today vying for our attention. Particularly now in construction, we've got Internet of Things, big data, drones, AR and VR, lots of companies demonstrating that. We've got BIM as a foundational technology. And now we have blockchain to consider as a potential technology in the industry. How do we make decisions about which technology to invest for our organizations, and personally, what should we invest in understanding ourselves? Should I personally invest in understanding blockchain? How will it help the business? To understand whether or not you should be investing in those technologies, you've got to think about where we are. Is the talk about blockchain, is it hype? What's the reality behind it? Now, there is an industry framework for talking about hype, which is Gartner's hype cycle, which, if you want to know where a technology is on the hype cycle, it might be worth investigating that when you're thinking about investing your company's money in it. The hype cycle is a generalized framework which looks at the visibility of a particular technology and tells you something about its maturity. So the hype cycle started as a technology trigger. It could be a paper, it could be sudden visibility of blockchain through the valuation of Bitcoin, for example, which generally leads to a lot of people talking about it, a lot of talking heads, people at conferences like this telling you about blockchain, and that leads to a lot of expectations around the technology. So we have AI and robots are going to take over the world, and a lot of pundits will start talking about it until the next technology comes along, and then they'll move to that one. So after the peak of inflated expectations, we reach the trough of disillusionment. This is the point at which a lot of those initial value propositions don't work out. We suddenly see technologies fail, and you can't necessarily adopt these very easily. But there are still people working on these technologies, and some people will work through the problems in the industry and deliver real solutions based on the technologies. AI is a particularly good one to think about because it's gone through a number of peaks and troughs in terms of value propositions in the past. In particular, I remember the era of expert systems, which were going to save the world at the time. So when you get through to the slope of enlightenment in this graph, what we're really talking about is real value propositions coming through, and that's kind of where you should be investing in technologies. Particularly, you don't want to be hitting the technology new at the peak of the plateau of productivity because you're a laggard in that situation, and you're probably being outperformed by your peers if they invested earlier. So Gartner produced a lot of information about telling you where these technologies sit on the hype cycle, and you can use that as a starting point. There's also interesting to look at the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you're aware of it, it looks very much like the hype cycle, and in fact, it pretty much is based on the same thing. And it's about our personal journey to wisdom about any particular technology. The interesting thing is that the peak of the hype cycle correlates to the peak of what's called Mount Stupidity in the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you're interested in checking that out, it's well worth having a look at. So when we're thinking about blockchain as a technology, what is the value proposition that blockchain can deliver? What is it that we can get from a solution built on blockchain? So firstly, it's immutable, so it's a permanent record. When we're adding something to blockchain, we expect that to be permanently on the record. Now that only works if it's distributed. If I have a blockchain and I make a change to it and then I hand it to you and say, hey, this is the truth, obviously you can't check that or verify it, so it only works if it's distributed. If you have a copy, now you can verify. And you can verify if I've made a change to that by checking yours, and you don't have to check the whole tree. But how do we then add to the blockchain? If I have a chain and you have a chain and multiple participants have a chain, we need a method to add to the blockchain. That's a consensus mechanism, which I'm not going to go into now. I'm trying to give you an idea of what the value propositions are rather than how to build this technology yourself. If we have a distributed consensus, then we should have trust. We don't need to trust a third party to manage the data for us. Everybody has access to the information. So immutability, distributed, do I have a need for a distributed mechanism? If I'm the only person accessing that data, well, what's the blockchain giving me? And the idea of removing trusted third parties from the system. So in terms of blockchain solutions, there's a lot, and I've come across a few new ones today, but there are blockchain solutions around real estate, smart cities, and Internet of Things. I don't really want to go into either of those because I'm going to focus on project delivery, solutions around project delivery rather than, say, financing or Internet of Things. And Internet of Things has its own issues around privacy and security, which I don't think the blockchain will necessarily solve, although I haven't mentioned anonymity, which is one of the characteristics of the blockchain. But that's not necessarily something we need for most of our applications in construction. Mostly we're interested in actually knowing the identity of the participants. So to talk about construction and its relevance, where is blockchain relevant, I want to kind of look at a couple of examples of supply chain solutions. These aren't specifically construction examples, but they're indicative of what the problems are and what the advantages are of blockchain. I've chosen Everledger as one of the examples because Everledger were part of the same Techstars cohort that Baystone were in back in 2015. And Everledger are putting diamonds on the blockchain, and there's a good reason why they're putting diamonds on the blockchain. They're high-value items that can be uniquely identified. They have unique characteristics. So each diamond has a set of characteristics which you can see in the, if you won't be able to read it, but trust me, there are some unique characteristics, particularly about high-value diamonds, which you can measure independent of the blockchain. You can store that information on the blockchain and now establish ownership and identity of the owner of that item. So if I rob that diamond from you and I try to sell it, somebody can verify that, I don't actually own that. So you've solved the theft problem. There's another thing that Everledger were trying to do with their blockchain solution, diamonds on the blockchain. And the name is interesting. The name was they didn't come into the cohort with that name. The name comes from Diamonds Are Forever, and it's a ledger, a distributed ledger, so hence the name Everledger. It's just a little bit of a side. Well, I remember what I'm going to talk about next. So the issue that Everledger were trying to solve was conflict diamonds. One of the things they're trying to solve is the issue of conflict diamonds. And conflict diamonds are, clearly a problem because the money made from mining those diamonds is used to fuel conflict in certain war-torn areas. But we have a problem here. We've tried to remove the concept of a trusted third party, but how do we get a physical asset into the blockchain to start with? So we go back to the problem of chicken and egg. Where does the trust lie? So you still need trusted third parties in this situation to put the information into the blockchain. But at least when the information is there, you can now trust the information that's been placed there because you have a direct link between the diamond and the properties of the diamond and the blockchain. So this is an interesting problem for putting physical assets on the blockchain. How do I verify them? And is it related to value? You can verify the transactions going through the blockchain, but can you actually look at a particular item? So a high-value item like a diamond is useful to look at because let's look at the next solution, which is based around mangoes. I was only going to say something else, but mangoes is what Walmart and IBM did as their blockchain solution on the Food Trust project. The problem Walmart are trying to solve is, where do my mangoes come from? So if I have a sliced mango product sitting on a shelf in my store, do I know where that came from? If there's been a problem with pesticides use in certain areas, can I verify that the pesticide, that this set of mangoes, this sliced mango in a box as part of somebody's lunch, hasn't been impacted by that? So the problem Walmart has is that it took them nearly 7 days in a proof of concept to validate where a particular set of mangoes came from. So with IBM, they worked on a project using the blockchain to try and provide traceability. The problem with this project is that they got it down to 2.2 seconds in terms of determining, so down from 7 days to 2.2 seconds. We have to question whether or not the blockchain was the right solution for this. What am I gaining from putting this system on the blockchain? And in this case, in the proof of concept, I don't really see the value of the blockchain, because you could have done this with a standard SaaS product, put all of my documentation in, put tracking through with barcodes, and in many cases that's probably what they're doing. There's some details available on the web, and I've spoken to the people at IBM, but I don't know the details of how they do the tracking through the supply chain, probably barcodes. But if I dump out a bunch of mangoes or replace them with another bunch of mangoes, you're not going to know that. So you still have to have trust in that supply chain. But I think the benefits of using the blockchain in this solution are actually going to become upstream if we get more people on board. So if Walmart and other suppliers and other consumers and producers and other supermarkets all combine together, now we have more traceability in the system. We could see that, say, a farm in producing mangoes is suddenly producing 10 times as many mangoes as it should be, and it's going to multiple participants in the market. So the value, I think, in the blockchain in this scenario is not in the proof of concept, but in the future viability of tracing food throughout the whole ecosystem, and in particular for food safety. So these are two supply chain solutions, not particularly related to construction, but they show you some of the value and hopefully some of the value, and some of the problems putting assets on in the digital realm on the blockchain. There's another area that is obvious in terms of blockchain use is obviously payment solutions. A lot of people have been talking about the problems with Carillion. They stretched out the payments to their supply chain. That didn't save Carillion, but it caused collateral damage in bringing down some other people or companies in the supply chain. And I know that the industry is not well known for paying on time, whether that's through the clients or the main contractors. So there's a potential to use smart contracts, which are essentially computer programs running on the blockchain, which can, given a set of inputs, determine whether you should be paid or not, or transfer ownership of an asset to you. So if you've produced a digital model, I was talking to the guys from BIMchain earlier on about their blockchain solution, which can transfer through a smart contract ownership potentially, or copyright, or access to a model, or do some verification. So in terms of trying to do smart contracts, don't think of smart contracts as trying to do the whole of REBA or JRE contracts. Think about it more in terms of small pieces of value that you can add, things that you can automate in terms of passing value down through the chain. And these could lead to payments. At the other end of the scale, we have companies doing micropayment solutions. A company did an ICO this year, a company called Etch, and they're providing a tokenized payment system to provide tokens to people providing labor into the construction industry. So if you go on site with your smartphone and you've got your Bluetooth switched on, it can detect that you're on site and can start to give you tokens based on the time you're spending on site. The idea behind that is you get paid up front, and you can exchange those tokens for fiat currency, the dollars, pounds, euros, whatever. The problem here, of course, is that, well, the challenge for this industry is that what happens if your contractor doesn't get paid? You're a subcontractor, you've hired some labor, you're providing them with cash through the Etch system, but you haven't been paid already. How do we square that circle? How do we not provide a more severe cash flow problem in that situation? So from our point of view, thinking about assurance, we really think about progressive assurance a lot, and how you can do that in real time. How can you provide real-time assurance in an industry so that you can connect the idea of a smart contract releasing payments to somebody providing their labor into the market on a day rate or a day basis. To do that, we need evidence, photographs, certification, sign-off, documentation. That's a progressive assurance problem. And we're not very good, I think, in the industry at doing progressive assurance. We have a number of problems if we think about it like this. So this is some kind of idealized situation. We have clients, suppliers, main contractors, subcontractors, architects, consultants. We have a lot of people providing information into the industry. And in many of the projects we've worked on, we have at least 2 EDMSs, maybe more. Lots of data sitting in various parts of the system, hidden in files somewhere, some on paper, some digitized, some in different digital systems. We have problems with manual sharing. We have out-of-date information, data flow not happening, people not getting access to the information even though it's available in an EDMS somewhere. We have unresponsive processes that require paper documents to be transferred around. It's a real problem for construction. This is a 2014 study that we refer to a lot when we're giving talks, when based on giving talks. And the problem is the industry itself. The information flow in the industry is massively distributed. If you take finance, my old industry as an example, we have exchanges where the data comes from, and everybody pulls the data from the exchange and they provide derivative products from that. But it's very centralized in terms of data flow. Construction industry has many, many participants all providing information in and trying to access it and having different levels of access to that data. So given that we have a distributed supply chain, distributed information, maybe we need a distributed solution to provide assurance. And internally we refer to this project as Quality Chain. This is not a product you can buy from Basedone at the moment, but it's an idea around providing something to the industry which allows you to publish your assurance documents onto the blockchain, which everybody can then access in real time. So we're interested in doing the R&D in about that. We don't think this should be owned by an individual company because this is something the industry should own, right? It's not something that you want to buy from us, it's something that everybody should be publishing into and pulling information from. So, to conclude, we think the technology is coming. There are some, I think I came across another one, there's BIM Chain are here, and Trust Chain, hello. And Trust Chain, I don't know if you guys are in the audience, but I saw that you have a stand here, so dealing with supply chain solutions. The incumbents are investing heavily. IBM are investing hundreds of millions in this technology and doing a lot of work in the consultancy field. And startups are starting to make waves in blockchain, and some of them are targeting the construction industry. The Digital Catapult have done a study on blockchain in construction and gave a talk recently at a Construction Blockchain Consortium meetup given by Matt Colmer, who is going to be, and that study is going to be published next month. So if you look at the industries that they're targeting, startups are targeting, 280 startups that they spoke to, and the industries that they're targeting by main vertical market, there's no mention of construction there. So clearly construction is lagging in terms of being of interest to startups, but as I've found out today, there are more available than I originally thought. When making your investment in the technology, is it the right time to invest in a solution based on blockchain? So you have to consider the cost. And the cost, remember, is not just the cost of investing your time and energy, but the opportunity cost. Kind of, should I be investing that time and energy in something else? Check that against your company's strategy. Does it make sense for your company? Are you an innovator company, or should you be just executing well on the technology when it becomes mainstream? And decide your level of commitment. You need to look at risk versus reward. How much risk am I going to, how much money am I going to risk on a particular technology? How much reward do I think it will give me as a company or as a person? And evaluate critically any solutions that are presented to you as being blockchain solutions. Do they actually require the blockchain to work and to give you value? Because there's certainly a lot of potential ideas out there that people will sell you as blockchain solutions, and the problem there is that blockchain developers are expensive, right? Developers are expensive in general, blockchain developers even more so your solutions are going to cost, and will they deliver value? So, questions? And thank you for your attention. Sorry?
A comprehensive talk about the
Oh, do I need?
Yeah, sure, go to here.
Okay.
What is the most interesting scenario you think about blockchain in construction industry, according to you?
What's the most interesting?
Area to invest.
Sorry,
for example.
I can't hear this very well. Is that?
According to you.
Hey?
According to you, which one is the best area of interest we can invest in according to blockchain, having blockchain?
According to blockchain, the best one to invest in, I really wouldn't want to make that decision. It depends really on what what is your interest? What does your company do? You have to evaluate any solution critically against what your company does. I can't tell you if if etch as a solution is the right thing for you if you're a subcontractor, or whether you should be investing in something like BIM chain if you're a modeler, or whether trust chain is the right thing to invest in as a solution, whether the supply chain really warrants a blockchain solution. So really, you have to think about the problem you're trying to solve rather than just applying random technologies.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So what problem can you think that can addressed by blockchain in construction?
Okay, well that's an interesting one. We've been working in the construction industry for a number of years and trying to get a technology adoption running. And the biggest problem I see is actually cultural, right? So getting technology solutions adopted is to some extent about hiding the technology solution from the participants. There are some people who are very interested in technology, but if you want broad and wide adoption, you really need to make that technology disappear and deliver value. So whether that's assurance as something that we're interested in, we see the value of disintermediating the assurance problem from ownership within silos of information. And silos of information is something that BIM is trying to tackle, and the CDE is supposed to enable that. But it doesn't seem that we're moving in that direction. We seem, there's obviously a land grab going on with everybody saying, and we do it too, we're a CDE, you can put all your data in our system. But if you could push that data out into the blockchain, disintermediate all of the suppliers, so I'm not trying to do myself out of a job here, but that seems to me to be a really valuable use of the technology. Make the information available, and then you solved potentially the handover problem as well.
But availability of sensitive information can be harmful as well.
Yes, but there are ways of putting the information into the blockchain that doesn't expose it to the public. You're making the record potentially of a transaction available, but that doesn't mean you actually put the data associated with that transaction. There are also permissioned blockchains as well. So if you look at Hyperledger, for example, IBM are putting a lot of time into that. And obviously that's an open source solution, but it's a permissioned blockchain as well, so you can have identity access rights as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Your time here is done, Simon.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.